All right, so I'm back again, and as I said, I was going to go into monoblue zombies more in depth and to why it is a legit strategy. Now, as far as I'm aware, there are only two generals that support monoblue zombies as a whole. One of them is Stitcher Geralf, who makes everyone mill 3 cards and this angle sucks. Hold on. All right. I guess that's all right there. Um. So anyway, the point is Stitcher Giraffe and Mistform Ultimus. Mistform Ultimus costs 3 colors and a blue. Is a 3/3 and is every single creature type. In all honesty, he's better for shenanigans and anything that involves like Lord of Illusion type effects where it says illusions get +1/+1 and have hexproof. That sort of thing. Now, but going into mono blue strategy, and I will pick up these cards individually or as a whole, I will bring them up to the screen and show y'all how you can do this. It is possible, and I've spent over a year working and perfecting this deck, and it is safe to say that yes, you can do this. Yes, this is a little out of the mainstream, as in mono black or blue black is probably one of the best combinations. However, I digress. I personally think cards like Sidisi, and Thraxmundar are their colors. Grixis and Bug are the best colors to do it because of drawing, milling, possibly countering, and ramp, or burning if you want to go red rather than green. Now, as far as what advantages blue have over black and red, it's specifically more controlling, better drawing, some better removal options, but mostly with creatures rather than non-creatures. And surprisingly, there's a lot you can play with in the graveyard or completely mess with other people's graveyards. However, I have found the way I did my blue deck is differently than the way you can, and it's differently than the way as far as like stacks or prison decks. Those use different strategies. To best use, where do you go? To best use Draw Stitcher's ability, and I misplaced it. I will find it in a little bit. The best way to use Stitcher Giralf is simply not be aggressive in a milling and exiling everyone's graveyard. Oh, here it is, right in front of me. Do not be aggressive when milling, and if you are, make sure you just exile the threats. That's the rule number 1. Exile threats only, or unless you absolutely need creatures, because people will remember that and they will hate you for it. My very first game I played, I got hated out because I ended up exiling, just going exile crazy. Yeah, I did not last very long at all. Now, the key strategies, the 3 main key strategies you want to remember when you're doing mono blue, and this, my deck backs this up pretty well. You want to focus around 3 things. Madness mechanics. This is welcome to the fold. You want to focus around madness mechanics. You want to focus around cards that want to be in the graveyard. Wonder. It is beautiful, right? Because, hey, my stuff has flying. Because at least half of my lands, 2/3 of my lands, are islands. So madness. Things that want to be in the graveyard. And last but not least, the heart of this deck, it's Stitchwing Scab, Advanced Stitchwing Scab, and Geralf's Masterpiece. Yes, Geralf's Masterpiece is legit and can work, especially since Oh no, I have no cards in hand. Wow, he's a 7/7 flyer. That's great. Um, sure, you gotta pay, what? Mr. Masterpiece says pay 4, discard 3. That's a hefty price, right? I mean, normally it is. Now, Stitchwing, you pay 3 and discard 2, and Stitchwing, you pay 2 and discard 2 cards. The advantage of this is, hey, as long as I have cards and mana, I'll put this bad boy out whenever the hell I feel like it. They all enter tap, sadly, which does suck. And Stitchwing Scab is a 3/1 flyer, so one little poke and it's out for the count. That's not necessarily a bad thing when you're running something like Ashnod's Altar and, God forbid, Skull Clamp, which I do. But the key advantage is when you have them in your graveyard, you can activate Madness whenever you want. However, keep in mind there are 7, and I repeat, 7 mono blue Madness cards that you can use. I am running at least 5 of them. One of them I had to cut because it just wasn't doing enough work, and that was something search. Basically, you can either pay 1 and cast it to draw a card, or you can discard. They only untap X number of permanents, where X number of permanents, X number of cards are in their graveyard. Combined with graveyard control, that's pretty brutal. Yes, I played with it, and it's gross. However, keep in mind it's one-time trigger, so you can target the same permanent multiple times, but it's only gonna untap one time. What else? There is Lost in Thought, which is mono blue arrest. Now, there's another card that does the same thing, but it's basically the creature can use its abilities and attack and all that as long as they sack a permanent first. Not quite as good when you're trying to do the controlling part, like graveyard control, but it does it all right. Then there is some other oddball cards that aren't necessarily worth mentioning, like Bazaar of Wonders. It comes in. Mist of Stagnation is a 5-drop, 5 CMC, 3 colors and 2 blue. Bazaar of Wonder is a 5-drop, 3 colors and 2 blue. It comes in, exile all cards from every graveyard. And whenever a spell is cast, it gets countered if the same card is on the field or in the graveyard. Combined with Spy Kit and probably a few other cards, it's pretty brutal. The best selection to use with those two is in green and white and blue, respectively. On the flip side, rather than doing graveyard control with blue, what you can do is shenanigans. One of the funniest little cards that I had in my deck for a long time before I recently just took them out. One of them is from Ixalan, and I don't have it yet, but when I do, it's going in here. It's basically Conspiracy for blue, and it costs, what, 3 mana? Yeah, pretty legit. Because everything being a zombie works pretty well when it comes down to something along the lines of having go Runebinder. Pay 3, exile creature card from graveyard, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token on the battlefield, then put a +1/+1 counter on every zombie creature you control. It works pretty well. I like it. So combined with something along the lines of that, and I think you get to see where I'm going. Now, in order to support Madness, you need cards like Girapur Ori, where you can go, I don't know, discard your entire hand due to Madness effects or some other shenanigans, and upkeep, draw 3 cards. Or make even copies of Draining Walk, which is a creature counterspell. Pretty funny. Oh yeah, pretty fun. Another all-star in this deck, which is hilarious because when I first saw it, it was so bad I just kind of went right over it. It was just too terrible. Pulse of the Grid. This little three drop card I absolutely love. It is my favorite draw spell in the entire game because 1, it's repeatable. 2, you are getting screwed on lands, or I mean cards, but not lands. This little card will keep coming back to you. Draw 2 cards, then discard a card. If an opponent has more cards in hand than you, return Pulse of the Grid to its owner's hand. So essentially, it'll never even go to the graveyard. It'll just keep going right back to your hand. Oh yeah, that's the best thing about it. It also triggers off Madness cards, which is pretty legit too. Now, before I get ahead of myself, cards that want to be in the graveyard. As I said, cards like Fervent Denial, any of the Stitch Wings of the Masterpiece, Deep Analyst, even Ulamog and Wonder. Ulamog is great just for the graveyard shuffling effect. Yep. Startled Awake. And it is the only mythic sorcery that turns into turns into a creature. So flip this thing up. It costs 5 mana to do so, and it's not a creature, so cards like Embalmer's Tools won't work, because that only affects creatures. Persistent Nightmare. Yeah, it turns into a 1/1 skulking creature that you can either clamp or you could swing with it first, too. But it says when it deals combat damage to a player, any player, return it to its owner's hands, which then you can then cast for 4 mana and mill somebody for 13. Then pay 5 and put it right back on the field again. Cards like that want to be in the graveyard. Cataract Leviathan. It's basically an unearth. What is it? Unearth serpent? Nope, it's a Leviathan. It's not even a serpent. It is basically a board wipe on a stick, on a creature. Comes in, it bounces everything that's not a land. All non-land permanents. Pretty legit. Any creature that wants to be in the graveyard for having Ghoul Runebinder, as I said before, because he exiles creatures and he makes lots of zombies and makes them bigger. Grimoire of the Dead, a mythic little legendary dude, artifact that reanimates every creature in every graveyard. However, you got to discard a card and put a study counter on it. It probably works best in Atraxa just for the proliferate, but once you have 3 on here, you tap it, remove all study counters, and then sacrifice it to reanimate everything. It works best either with Atraxa or with untap effects like... Where is it? Untap effects like... I just had it here too. That's so annoying. Untap effects... Wherever that blue zombie is, that untaps something. Yeah. That's quite irritating. He was here, and I just disappeared. Whatever, does not matter. Oh yeah, Fate Stitcher. That little guy is pretty legit as well. And he's also unearthed, so you can do it a second time, in case he dies. However, he costs 4 mana and does not have haste. Keep that in mind. So, Madness cards, playing off the graveyard, instant speed reanimating creatures, mostly the Stitch Wings, cards that like to gains cumulative upkeep of colorless and blue. And if you don't pay it or if it leaves the field, it just gets exiled. It's basically unearthed. So the way to get around that is use Deadeye Navigator and pair it and then blink it. So you pay 2, You pay 2, reanimate something from your graveyard after you color hack the card Dreams of the Dead with something like Lambert Die, where you just say, hey, instead of white or black, it's blue and black. You cannot hit something like Ulamog, which is colorless. That does suck a little bit, but it isn't too bad. Now, if you do mill one of those legendary Eldrazi's, don't worry too much. Yeah, it's gonna suck a little bit, but you're never gonna lose your graveyard unless somebody just straight exiles it. Now, what else? Grimoire of the Dead reanimates, or yeah, it does technically reanimate. Nim Deathmantle is an all-star. Basically, I think it went up in price to like $8 to $10 recently. It's a 2-drop artifact equipment. You never pay its equip cost. Never, ever. What it says is, equipped creature gets +2/+2, has Intimidate, and is a black zombie. Is a black zombie. I did color hack that one game playing against like a 13-year-old, and I hit him for like 40 damage with pink zombies. Yes, pink and brown are colors you can legitly call, but only because of unglued cards. That kid got a kick out of it. It's pretty funny. And his mom was there too, being in a game store and all that, and she just kind of laughed. But I digress. The second part is the most important part. When a non-token creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you don't even need to control it. Somebody can just steal and sack it. You'd be like, I'll pay for. And if you do, reanimate that card and attach Nim Deathmantle to it. Nim Deathmantle is one of the strongest reanimators you can come across. Combine that with that creature counterspell, Draining Welk, and something like Ashnod's Altar, you're going to wreck somebody's day. Because since mana doesn't use the stack, you sack it for 2, and you tap 2 islands. Whoop, I'll counter your spell. I'll do it all day long. Yeah. Until they make something like a Grave Titan, which pops in and makes multiple creatures. Dude, it's not broken at all, but you will make somebody not like you after that. I tuned this deck to make it be multiplayer friendly, rather than just, because I don't want people just to hate me or whatever. That's not the point. I made a French deck just for that alone, just to screw with other people, or mainly just one person. It's a little harder than I thought, surprisingly. All right, now getting to the heart of the deck here. As I said, you want stuff in the graveyard. Wonder, Fervent Denial, creature cards that go with Grimoire of the Dead, Kedrick Leviathan. Also, creature cards work with Hour of Eternity, but I haven't actually played it yet, so I don't know how good it is. I expect to make only about 2 to 3 creatures. And whether or not they're useful, I don't know. I know there's at least 10 valid targets to hit. Sphinx of Thune is pretty legit. Even a Ulamog, if you can flash it in. Geralf's a Mind Crusher, a Body Double. Also, with that on note, keep in mind, Body Double is, as Body Double comes into play, you may choose a creature card in a graveyard. If you choose, say, a Clever Impersonator or a Vizier effect, it's basically, so it comes on the battlefield, you choose a target. It's going to enter as that. Boom. Then it says, say, Vizier of Many Faces says you may have Vizier of Many Faces enter the battlefield as a copy. So what it does is, however, as many of those creatures as you have, where you hit a clone and hit a Vizier, you become a copy of that creature, which allows you to become a copy of that creature. Until you find a legit creature that you want to have it copy or enter the battlefield as a copy of, none of them replace each other. That's what I'm trying to say, is that you can go through as many of them as you want. It probably will never do any good or help out in any way. You're probably just going to give everyone a massive headache. But the point is, you could have a Body Double come in as a copy of Clever Impersonator, which then comes in and copies that Mirari, or the Mirari's Wake, or that Blightsteel Colossus. or God forbid, I don't know, somebody's guy's cradle. Excuse me, non-land permanent. Clever Impersonator doesn't do that. Um, Somebody's Gilded Lotus, since that's pretty darn good. Yeah. So you can have Body Double enter as a non-creature card. That is sometimes relevant if you need something like a Navarre's Disc, or you need extra mana and someone has a Mirari's Wake out. You just have it enter as a copy of Clever Impersonator. Boom. Now my land's tapped for double. Or triple if you have Cage Stone on the field. So as far as anything else that wants to be in the graveyard, the general kind of wants to be if you have ways to exile it out. But I took out some of the other cards that do graveyard exiling because they weren't really fun. I might add them back in later if there's anything good. But cards that want to be in the graveyard, creature abilities that work with Embalmer's Tools, activate abilities of creature cards in your graveyard card cost 1 less to activate. Tap and untap zombie control to make somebody mill a card from their library. Traditional mana rocks, Thought Vessel, Mind Stone, Ashnod's Altar. Not typical blue, but it works when you're doing creatures like zombies. And a very good card, Inspiring Statuary. It works with a lot of artifacts, especially equipment and clue stones. Oh my word, Inspiring Statuary works with clue stones beautifully. Alright, so that's pretty much it. I will give you the list and let y'all check it out. I hope y'all like it. Some little minor cards that y'all have fun with. Commit. Not quite as good as that 2-drop instant that says, hey, bounce a non-land permanent back to their owner's hands, and if you control a zombie, make that player discards a card. You can use yourself. It's great. But commit is a put target spell or non-land permanent to its owner's library second from top. So it doesn't go to their hand. You can hit yourself, something you control, like a permanent, or better yet, a spell that is uncounterable, like a Blightsteel Colossus, is pretty, I won't say common, but it's good. It's really hard to just straight remove it. It's just not that easy. There are ways to do it, yeah, but cards that are uncounterable, cards that you just cannot deal with when they hit the board state, or if you're just trying to slow someone down a little bit, you can do it as well. So Commit and Memory, which is also a graveyard shuffler and it draws you cards. It's also pretty good. That's an all-star. What I said earlier as far as the clone effects, Vizier of Many Faces with its Embalm. Startled Awake, only because you have a sorcerer that turns into a creature. Insidious Will is my favorite counterspell just because it copies or redirects, not just counters. But yeah, Pulse of the Grid. Now, Overtaker is a new addition, as well as... Where did that other little guy go? So, Overtaker and... There is one other little dude, and he draws cards beautifully. Wharf Infiltrator. Those two are really good in certain blue decks. Now let's start with the older. Overtaker is a threaten or something like a hijack for blue, but you pay 4 and discard a card. Untap target creature and can control it until end of turn. That creature gains haste until end of turn. So you can literally steal their own win condition and smack them in the face with it, steal their general, just for a turn. But say if you have you have a sack outlet, you could always sack it, or if you have a mirror pool, you could always make a copy of it, or whatever that other card is that makes a copy that's in your graveyard. Those are also pretty good. That's a 1/1 spell shaper, and I believe it's a human spell shaper, but it really doesn't matter. Wharf Infiltrator is a 2-drop as well, but it's Skulk, and you loot whenever you deal combat damage to a player. The third effect is whenever you discard a creature card from, you may pay 2. If you do, put a 3/2 colorless Eldrazi Horror creature token on the battlefield. I've got this bad boy out turn 2, and with like a whole bunch of creature cards in my hand, like say 4 of them, in like 4 turns I ended up with 4 3/2 Eldrazi Horrors, and my land base was completely settled. When you're stuck on 2 lands, and this dude and some fat creatures are in your hand, oh, it is so beautiful because you're looting, making creatures, you're having stuff in your graveyard. Everything a zombie player wants. But the key differences between black, blue, and white, since those colors are now available, is that black reanimates, black has the most lore effects, black tutors and kills very efficiently. You've got 4 different things that black is good at. Blue, graveyard control, graveyard matters, that theme is actually stronger in blue than it is in black, but not when it comes to reanimation. You just have like flashbacks, more flashbacks in blue. Counter and control, which I utterly despise. That's why I have like 7 counters on this deck. I've got very few. But countering and controlling is an important aspect of the game. You have that. You have, as I said, madness, things that interact with card draw. That's number 3. Anything with card draw will give blue an advantage. Just nothing quite like a Consecrated Sphinx, which is going to draw you 16 cards, because that's a kill on sight target. But, so card draw and really cool shenanigans like Overtaker. Overtaker, Commit to Memory. And of course, the Oddball, the Gurport Ories, the Misthollow Griffins, things that the normal blue player would never have. At the very heart, what makes this be a zombie deck is the fact that your non-zombies will feed your zombies eventually. Your zombies will overrun and be very oppressive. And I specifically am talking about cards like Grimoire of the Dead, because whatever that like 10-drop sorcery for black is that reanimates every creature, it does the same thing, but it's more recurable, especially since it's an artifact. In black, it has like something like Sins of the Past, which allows you to cast an instant or sorcery from graveyard, and it costs 6 mana. And if it would go to the graveyard, it gets exiled instead. So it's a basically flashback for any instant sorceries for black. That's like about it. Blue, they got more ways to recur instant sorceries back to your hand or to reuse them. Hour of Eternity, which exiles creatures and makes 4/4 copies of them. And if you can manage to copy a token doubler, you're pretty good, because you'll make 2 copies of them. Undead Alchemist. There is a sub-milling theme, or a milling theme, which you can take full advantage with, especially with Stitch of Geralf. There's quite a few artifacts in the legendary land, Minime, that untaps target legendary permanent. You can use that with Stitcher. I had it in here, and then I traded it away for something else. And to replace it, I ended up throwing in I gotta find it real quick. A Celiphed Coliseum. Don't hate me if I get the name wrong. But it's basically Threshold, draw 3, then discard 3, but it's for target player. Yes, you have to sacrifice the land, but it's still good. Still legit. What else? Undead Alchemist with its milling. Rise from the Tide, which is pretty fun, but I always forget that the zombies that you make enter tapped. It costs 6 mana, and whenever it makes X 2/2 black zombie creatures tapped, they enter the battlefield tapped, where X is the number of instant sorceries in your graveyard. And having Gold Rune Binder, that I don't need to impress upon too much. Now, one little trick that goes in every single deck, or should I say two tricks? Two, the Chroma's Memorial and Eldrazi Monument. Because blue is weak, incredibly weak to mass board wipes, especially if they're uncounterable. Or there's something like Hellish Norm where you just can't simply counter it, or if they do, they're just going to reanimate it. Oh, that's so annoying. Eldrazi Monument gives your stuff three things: flying, +1/+1, and indestructible. The last one's the most important. Now, I will say that the small price to pay, the small price of sacking a creature for your upkeep just to keep it around, it's a small price, especially when you have the Stitch Wings attached to attached to a Skull Clamp. Oh, I'll sack a creature. I'll draw 2 cards. And then I'll just, pay 2, or should I say discard 2, and pay 2 mana or 3 mana and just reanimate it right back up. Just put them right back on the field, clamp them, and wait till next turn and do it all over again. Yeah, that's going to be annoying for everyone else because guess what? Unless they specifically exile your creatures, you'll always have indestructible creatures. And wait, you have Wonder in the graveyard, so your stuff has flying again, even if they do remove it. Yeah, pretty funny. So, all in all, what you can take away from this is blue can be a very hard force to deal with when it comes down to zombies. When you're doing tribal zombies versus non-zombies, the biggest problem is Wizards has not made any competitive, and I mean good competitive, zombies for blue yet. I don't remember the ones that are that good. They had a mythic 3-drop CMC zombie, but it required, in order to cast it, to exile 3 creature cards from your graveyard. Usually it would have been the General and Miss Hollow Griffin and like another creature. But you're losing creatures in an EDH, that's a little too hard to do in blue. It's just too hard. You can go that route, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, only because the support there is extremely limited, and the fact that targeted removal and mass board wipes will just knock those guys right off their feet. Or control them and steal them. They can do that too. Alright, that'll wrap up the session, and I'm going to put a link at the bottom there, just so you all can check this out too for yourself. But remember, tribal blue zombies, not that strong yet. Maybe they will in the future. The best way you can do is to work with some sort of sub-zombie theme. Or do what I do, which is simply feed the non-zombies to the zombies, exiling them, turn them into zombies, and benefit in that way. Alright? Alright, catch y'all later.